Kada počnem govoriti, samo stavite mi prvi onaj, molim vas. Hello, good day from Croatia. My name is Vjeran Pirsic. I'm president of Eneryg Kvarner, and we have this panel as a part of 11th Energy Conference of the island Krk. Island Krk is the northest and the biggest Croatian island. Our size is 408 square kilometers, on which we have 20,000 resident inhabitants every winter, but in the summer, the number of inhabitants are coming up to 120,000. This is obviously a very big problem for infrastructure. The reason of this migration is obviously tourism. And because of that, my island, in this place where I am sitting now, it is the city council of Krk, made decision at 2012 to become energy independent 2030. So the decision which had been done in European Commission 2020, we made 8 years before Brussels, and our target is 20 years before Brussels. Why we have this webinar? Frankly said, there is a few reasons for that. As first, we have a transposition of the RED II directive, Renewable Energy Directive 2, in the laws of the Southeast Europe countries, let's say Balkan. And second, we have the closing of the one very interesting European project. What is the link between these two things? I think that Professor Jens, who is our keynote speaker, can much better than me explain what is the news of the RED II directive, but obviously the citizen energy, or energy democracy, is a very important part of this energy transition, what we are waiting now to happen finally. And we think that some results of this project can really help us how to reorganize the energy transition here in Southeast Europe. From my point of view, especially its interest experience of Praha, because I don't trust to ideas that government will make everything. I think that we, on the local level, must work much harder to really make energy transition on time. And finally, what mean on time? This morning we had excellent panel about climate change. And when you hear from the experts who definitely are not bad informed, that we can face to the real challenge from the climate change on the local level, only things what we can do is to try to help to stop climate change with the local energy transition. Now I have some technical data, information about this webinar. So please, Lana, can you show us the rule of the game, if I can call it on this way. This webinar is recorded. You can see the record of that tomorrow. Also, presentation. You can give us question in Q&A. You can write your question in chat as well. And if you don't have time or answers on your questions today, we will try to do it in the next few days. You can give a suggestion also on the future webinars in the chat or by email, and you are very free to share recording tomorrow after you get it. And we'll have some pools who can help us to make better webinars in the future. And please also answer on the satisfaction questions on the end of this webinar. Thank you, Lana. So after this short or long introduction, I'm very happy to invite Professor Jens. Jens, can you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Okay, how is the weather in Germany? Here it's very sunny.
Could be much better, but it's at least not raining.
Frankly say, a few minutes before in the break, I check my photovoltaics and they give me much more energy than I accept in December, so I'm very happy. I'm becoming more and more renewable, at least by the energy. Yes, thank you. First, thank you because you are here with us, and we don't know each other for the very long time, but I think that we have very parallel things what we are doing in the last decade. You are basically a lawyer, if I'm not wrong.
That's correct. I'm a lawyer by training.
Okay, nobody's perfect. Definitely, you are not a classical lawyer. You're extremely, I think, open mind to understand the really process what is coming in our society, and even more, you are becoming definitely expert for the energy. So, before your presentation in 2 minutes, can you give us your background? How did you come in this area of energy and law and everything around?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Vjeran. First of all, thanks for inviting me to speak here today. Actually, as you mentioned, I'm a lawyer by train. I've been working for many, many years in comparative law, and I did, amongst others, study in Poland at the Universitet Jagielloński in Kraków. So after my studies, Dzień dobry. After my studies in Poland, I spent more than 15 years in the post-Soviet countries, working also, amongst others, in the Polish privatization ministry in the early 90s, which was a very interesting period, witnessing the ownership transformation. And now we actually have the energy transformation. And that, where's the link? When I was working in the ministry, I was always asking myself, who should be the new owners of the formerly socialist economies? And there is no law of physics that says how this ownership setting should be. And one of my big topics, and that's where I'm coming from, is participation, actually financial participation. So at the time, how could people as employees become co-owners of the enterprises that they work for? And then later, years later, we developed this further and asked ourselves, how can consumers as customers to utilities become co-owners of these utilities? And then around 10 years ago, when the energy transitions picked up speed, we decided that these participation mechanisms are actually prone. They are ideally for the decentralized production in renewables. And that's what introduced me to the whole world of what I call consumer stock ownership plans, where actually consumers become co-owners of utilities, and in this case of renewables.
So, yeah, basically the question of the day is who will be owner of all these new photovoltaics who are coming on our roofs, because we don't like that happened, same things what happened with the windmills, where big energy companies now is still owner of that. We would like to have the citizens who will be owner of their own installation of their own roof, right?
That's right.
And this is not definitely a restoration of socialism or communism. It is new way of capitalism.
Absolutely agreed.
Okay, so please, yes, I know that you're very short with the time. You really have interest project, frankly say. I know at least 10 or 20 Horizon projects who work with the same field. And would you be so kind to explain, you have some short presentation, what you made in the last few years, what is results, and last but not least, or even the most important, how we can apply this model, maybe even from Praha model, to our communities in the Southeast Europe.
Very well. Thanks again, Vjeran. So I'll share my screen with you. Just a moment. I trust you should see my first.
Yes, you can go on. Yes.
Okay, very well. So I'm presenting today the results of our Horizon 2020 project SCORE. SCORE stands for Supporting Consumer Ownership in Renewable Energies. And as a lawyer who has been teaching for more than 10 years now at the Faculty of Economics, of course, the question is not only in theory, what are the legal models, but in practice, how can we implement co-ownership models where we have not only individual citizens as co-owners, but for example, also municipalities, small or micro enterprises under the roof of one concept. And that's where I would like to introduce to you today the consumer stock ownership plan as a prototype business model for renewable energy communities under the clean energy package. A quick word of introduction to this challenge. So what are we looking at? We are looking at what I call here the energy systems of tomorrow, which obviously are different than what we are used to in the fossil world in four aspects. One is that these new energy systems are bidirectional. So the energy flows go both ways. Then what is also very important is that the ownership setting and the partners involved is very heterogeneous. So you have agricultural businesses, you have individuals, you have municipalities, you have, as I mentioned, small and micro-sized enterprises who all are becoming now active consumers and prosumers. That means that they're not only consuming renewable energy, but at the same time that they're producing it. And this, of course, also means that in many of these systems, and that's the third characteristic, we will see actually flexibility measures, be it storage, be it other forms of co-generation, for example. So in a nutshell, these systems are becoming much more complex, and that's really the most important point in my presentation today. The co-owners or the shareholders are very heterogeneous, so they are not a homogeneous group as we know it from other projects, let's say an energy co-op where all the members are just individual citizens, but different partners have to cooperate under the same roof, and that of course is a challenge. The first challenge is structure, and that's what Vjeran knows as an engineer. We are talking about architecture and the design of these energy systems of tomorrow, which of course brings along also new rules, and that is what I call here governance. So the question of what shall be the rules to administer and to regulate these systems and the energy supply, but also the energy production, which now will be done by prosumers. And this brings me to the main challenge of the SCORE project, to develop actually business models. That is the question of transaction between these partners. So what are the contractual arrangements that enable such projects to flourish?
Excuse me, Jens, may I interrupt you?
Yeah.
From my point of view, very important question. What Brussels prefer? Because theoretically, you can have the new energy models, new energy topology, with the ownership only of the big company. Now you introduce prosumers, you introduce energy cooperatives, energy communities. And my question of the day is, what is a wishful thinking of Brussels? Do they want to have the same ownership structure like we have now, or they really want to go to, what is your opinion, non-formal opinion? What is your feeling about it?
Actually, this brings me to the second slide, and that is the clean energy package. So at the European level, these new rules were introduced under the so-called clean energy package. And I'm not going into any details. I just want to quickly highlight that there are two core sets of rules that will be important for us. One is, of course, the Renewable Energy Directive, the recast, which introduces renewable energy communities as a new governance model. But there's also the Internal Electricity Market Directive, the IEMD, which introduces citizen energy communities. And in a nutshell, what's the difference here? The European Commission and the Parliament and the Council actually introduced this new model in order to broaden ownership. So the idea is that the system will not run on concentrated ownership, as in the past, in the fossil world, but that we actually will need these co-owners, and that they will have to be also small co-owners. So yes, I would say the answer to your question, Vjeran, is they want to promote dispersed ownership, but of course this should still be compatible with the market, and that's where it becomes difficult. So we are trying to square this circle in order to, on the one hand side, promote renewable energy sources. That's what really the aim is of Renewable Energy Directive. And to, of course, also foster acceptance. And that's important, where co-ownership plays a big role, because if you look at a wind turbine, let's say, and you think it's ugly, you may change your mind when you're benefiting from it because you're making money as a co-owner. So the difference between the Renewable Energy Directive and the IEMD is that in the IEMD, it's more about a level playing field, the same rules for everyone. Whereas in the Renewable Energy Directive, there is a preferential treatment for these renewable energy directives, and the governance model actually says that no single owner in one of these energy communities should dominate the community. So there is a governance requisite which says that nobody can own more, I mean, I'm simplifying this, than 33%. And that's important because, you know, a usual municipal project would be at least 51% municipal ownership because they want to keep control. So in this new world, under these new rules, if you want to qualify as a renewable energy directive, you have to comply with the business, with this governance model. And that means that the local partners have to own 51%, and that no single shareholder can own more than 33%. And that, of course...
Excuse me, but this is a changing of the whole society. It is definitely a challenge for the typical decision makers to accept that we ordinary small people have right to have this kind of influence.
Exactly.
Are you sure that this can be very well accepted by the governments on the Balkan in Southeast Europe?
Well, you know, the problem is actually that the transposition process, so these are the rules at the European level, and now we have to see what do the legislators do in the individual countries. And an example of this transposition are the new rules in the electricity market law. And I'm just giving here one example to show you that this transposition is not linear, it's not straightforward, but legislators make their own decisions. And in the case of the transposition of the IEMD, of the Internal Electricity Market Directive, the Croatian legislator actually decided to be much more restrictive than the internal electricity market is requiring. And this also means that with regard to the Renewable Energy Directive, as you pointed out in your opening statement, it will be very important to see this process as an evolution, because if the business models are not attractive for all partners, then basically in 5 or 10 years, there will be, I don't know, maybe only 50 energy communities or 500 across Europe. But if the business model and the rules are attractive, we will have, I don't know, 5,000, 50,000, maybe many, many more. But, and this is really crucial to understand, it's an opt-in model. So energy communities will still be possible under a different governance model, but then they don't qualify for some of the incentives. So if the incentive system and the rules are attractive, then many projects will opt to be either citizen energy communities or renewable energy communities. But if these rules are not attractive, and if the incentives are not attractive, then we will just see very similar ownership setting as in the fossil world. And big energy communities will still set up their own energy communities, but they will not simply not qualify. So what I'm saying is there's a real challenge here, and the new rules are great, but they need to be transposed carefully.
Hello.
And the transposition may need to be
You're freezing
adapted.
now.
Oh, sorry. Can you still hear me?
So basically, yeah, it's okay now. Basically, you think that we will have, like in Adam Smith, hidden hand of the market who will grow up the energy communities if we have the good cases, good business cases.
Exactly. And one of the obstacles that I just want to highlight here is in the new electricity market law, the decision-making rules for citizen energy communities are very restrictive because they follow the cooperative principle of one member, one vote. And that was very surprising for me because in none of the other countries that we have looked at has the legislator followed this model. So usually in a citizen energy community, it would be simply proportional to shareholding. And that's also a model that's possible under the Renewable Energy Directive. So in the draft of the renewable energy law in Croatia, this model is more flexible. So at the moment, I would say the champion in Croatia to have these models will be renewable energy communities actually, and not so much citizen energy communities, because under the present law, under the electricity market law of October 2021, businesses, but also municipalities will be very reluctant to join these projects because it's only one member, one vote. So let's say if the municipality in Krk would own 30% of the shares, they would still only have one vote under this governance setting. Now, in the Renewable Energy Directive, this is different, but still there is a cap for the local partners and for the individual partners. So the local partners need to own more than 51%. And no single shareholder can own more than 33. And that means and now I'm getting to the question of the business model, that the business model has to be at least flexible, and it has to avoid problems where the different partners in the decision-making process are having too much frictions. Now, what does this mean for the consumer stock ownership plan? The consumer stock ownership plan, instead of the traditional model where our consumers here on the left, on the right upper hand, would directly invest in a renewable energy plant, foresees that there should be some sort of operating company, a legal entity, as foreseen also in the Renewable Energy Directive or in the Citizen or in the IEMD. What is new in our model is that our consumers, the individual shareholders, so some of the citizens, for example, on Krk, they don't become directly shareholders here in the operating company, but that they are represented by some sort of trusteeship. This can be a physical person, a trustee, or it could be an entity in turn. So the consumers have one trustee who represents them on the board of the operating company. And this also means that other shareholders in that company don't have to discuss every business decision with 200 individuals, but that they have one telephone number, one trustee who will be the person that they work on an everyday basis. However, important decisions.
Do you think that it can be a good idea that consumers will be organizing an energy cooperative before they
For
choose their
example, so that the trusteeship could also be a cooperative where the chair of the co-op would sit on the board of the operating company, and the members, the consumers, are individual members of our cooperative. Now, what is the leverage, or what is the advantage of the business model? The advantage is above all that the operating company can take on leverage, so it can take on a bank loan to finance larger projects also. And it's not the individual consumers who have to take on micro loans, which would be very expensive and which, of course, would increase transaction costs. So it's single source financing. That's the first characteristic. The second one is, of course, because we have this operating company, we can have other co-investors like a municipality, like a small and medium-sized enterprises or micro enterprises who can become shareholder of the operating company and who would deal, as I said, not with 200 families, but that on the everyday basis, they would only deal with the members of the management board of the operating company. And that makes decision-making faster. And of course, it also protects our consumers because the trustee, it could be the cooperative, will be knowledgeable and will advise the shareholders, the individual ones here, our citizens, with regard to the business decision. And of course, all important decisions will still be voted on the level here of the trusteeship. And then our trustee goes to the operating company and will there represent the interests of the consumers. And that way, we make the business model also attractive for businesses and for municipalities, because it is our experience of the 4 years of project implementation that municipalities or businesses especially will not, or only very in exceptional cases, join a cooperative.
So, excuse me, in our project, we had the idea that municipality should have at least 26% of the ownership, and local partners from the island should have at least 76% of the ownership. It was something like our base idea that in Croatia, if you have 26% of the ownership, you can make a veto on big decision. Yeah.
You have a blocking minority, absolutely. That's very wise. But as I said, what's important is here so at the level of the operating company, the municipality would have a blocking minority of at least 26%. And the group of the individual shareholders, as you said, would have 74%. But what my question is, can we open this to not only have individual citizens here, but also businesses? Or can we maybe have also strategic investors, which we could offer, let's say, 25% or 10% or 15%?
No, our idea is, frankly say, to give to the strategic investors 24%. They can veto, and our favorite for the strategic partner is somebody who can deliver us our batteries for the storage.
Yes, and this is
we must push companies in, because we have very strong tourist industry, and our hotels already have big photovoltaics, and they should become part of the community with their facilities on the roof of the hotels.
Absolutely agreed. And what is also important, so one, of course, element is that we invest in renewables here, an existing or an expansion of a new or an existing of an expansion plant, which then will supply energy to our citizens and they pay for the money. But also another important element is that you implement energy efficiency measures in order to reduce self-consumption, which means that you can sell more excess production to third parties. And this in turn would enable the repayment of loans. Now, this also means that the projects become more complex and that you actually need professionals, what you just mentioned, Vjeran. So I totally agree that the business model has to be attractive also for professional actors. And that's where actually I will come to the end of my presentation. I will show you on the next slides very quickly 3 levels of co-investments, because the idea here is to show you that our business model, and as a prototype, but also your model on the island of Krk, should be as flexible as possible to allow different interests to co-invest. What does this mean? Okay, let's take a look. So the first level of co-investment is the standard model, where you have the operating company, where you have our consumers represented by the trustee and the local co-investor, so that would be your municipality with 26%. They form the members of the renewable energy community and can take on a loan to finance their investments. And of course, what is important, they effectively control the CSOP operating company with owning together more than 51%, which means that strategic investors that you just mentioned, in theory, could have up to 49% of the shares. But if we are talking about renewable energy communities, as I mentioned, there's the cap. They can't dominate it, so it's only 33%. And the question now is, will strategic investors be interested to be shareholders here and maybe also be responsible for a loan that is taken on behalf of the consumers? In case that they see this as an obstacle, we are modifying the model a little bit, and we create not only the operating company, but a holding company, which would mean that the operating company can still secure the bank loan, but that these two form what we call a capital tax group as a tax shield. And what is more important, that now our strategic investor who will invest in the operating company will not be liable for any loans that are on the level of the CSOP holding. So what I'm saying is you can separate these two entities in order to make the project, if it's a large project, more attractive for commercial investors, which still can own.
Sorry, what is typical topology? We have few projects here. So maybe instead of operating company, you can tell operating companies.
Yes,
because
this is actually
one facilities you have one strategic investors, for another you have another one. So
yes.
We can have different shareholders topology from project to project.
Exactly. So Vjeran, as usual, you're too fast. You're anticipating my thoughts. So what is the third level? And that is where actually projects become more complex, as in the cluster structure. So in these settings, you would still have the local holding, which could effectively control not only one asset company, let's say for photovoltaics, but there could be more than one asset company. So one could be for photovoltaics, one could be for a wind turbine, one could be for a bioenergy reactor. And of course, in such a complex setting, you would also need somebody who would be responsible for the balancing of the energy flows. And this is where sometimes an investor will say, okay, I don't want to become co-owner, but I want to offer you the services. So we are still securing our bank loans over the asset companies for each investment separate, because banks will ask collateral only for one project. So if a bank gives money for photovoltaics, they don't want to be involved in wind and vice versa. But what we can also do is we can delegate the balancing responsibility for all these asset companies, one for the wind, one for the photovoltaics, one for the biogas, to a professional operator who not necessarily needs to become shareholder in our energy community. So what are the options now for our investors? One is, of course, traditional to invest in the assets, let's say 24% of your photovoltaic project. But you could also have an investor that says, I don't want to become a member of the energy community, but And actually, my daughter company, who will do the balancing responsibility, will actually be a 100% daughter. So you can still have the operating company outside of the energy community, but it can cooperate with the energy community as a service provider. And to close my talk, so what I'm showing you here is that with growing complexity of the projects, you also need to give more choices to different types of co-investors. And this really depends. Is the co-investor a plant engineer? Then he or she will probably be interested to invest in the assets. But if it's an energy supplier or a DSO, maybe they want to stay outside. So all I'm saying here is provide maximum flexibility and discuss this with your local, with the Croatian Energy Ministry in order to show that the laws in turn, when they are transposing, need to be adapted in order to be really open. So our message is let all flowers bloom. We don't need one size fits all model, but we really have to tailor it to the specific needs of each of the project. And the islands are, of course, predestined to be complex projects because energy supply, if they are remote from the coast, is very expensive. And most likely you will not only have one energy source, but you will have more than one renewable energy source. And I think, Vjeran, on Krk, you already have photovoltaic and you have wind power. But it could be...
it will be basically at least free energy source, because if you have just one, you have very high risk. But my main question, it is really impressive what you show to us, frankly say, but is it all 100% legal according to RED 2 directive? It's all inside, or it is some your upgrade of directive?
No. This is, so the model that I'm presenting to you now is totally in compliance with the RED 2. Of course, you have to respect the thresholds, so the 33% threshold and the 51% threshold. But the idea is to make it flexible and to make a distinction between different types of investment. One could be becoming actually a member here in the circle of the renewable energy community at the core, which effectively controls it. So this would be only qualified for the local co-investors. Or you would have non-local strategic co-investors who still could invest in our asset companies, but who could also decide to be just service providers. And that way, you relax the, if you have only one model where you say either you become co-owner or not, you will make it unattractive. And what is, however, important, that the transposition, and this is some experience that we have from all other countries, even pioneering countries. Maybe just one quick example, Italy. Italy was one of the first countries that transposed the RED 2. And in the beginning, they had a limit of 200 kilowatt for the installations, which was clearly designed for photovoltaics. They didn't think of heating, block heating systems, where 200 kilowatt is, of course, nothing. Now they have corrected this error. And they had also a problem with limits on the voltage level for electricity energy sharing. And again, after 1.5 years of transposition process, they are now correcting some of the errors they did in the beginning. And that's where I'm saying, don't panic if the legislator in the beginning doesn't transpose exactly how you wish they should transpose, because this is a process and it will probably take 1 or 2 or 3 years to adapt also the laws to the needs of the co-investors. And that's exactly what I think was very good what you said in the beginning, Vjeran. Of course we can fight the ministry, of course we can try to protest, but it is much more desirable to cooperate and to help them with other best practice from other European countries to show that there's no problem with having errors in the first transposition round. They can be remedied, and you can make these laws much better. And that's where we will help you in the new year to accompany this process with the ministry and with all the stakeholders in Croatia.
Yeah, just to add one very specific moment in Croatia, especially the islands, we have pretty high income from tourism, and Croatian citizens have in the bank something like 40 billion euro. Wow. Basically without any interest. So what we can do through the energy cooperatives and energy communities, and using this model, we can give a chance people to invest money and guarantee them at least 4% of income per year.
Totally
According to
agree.
our numbers, sun production and everything. So it can be good also as a challenge for the promoters of investors who can
Maybe
join.
one last remark, Vjeran, before I'm coming to an end. You mentioned those that have money on their bank account. But what is also important, and I think this will become more important over the next years, that we also have models that offer co-investments or inclusion to people that are so far excluded, and especially also to energy poor. So this is also an opportunity that you show to your ministries, and this is what Todor knows very well from Bulgaria, but also in other Central Eastern European countries. There's a big problem about energy poverty. And if you want to have support of the population for the energy transition, you have to be inclusive. And that's where actually our model also allows the inclusion of vulnerable consumers. And that's just, I want to open this window in order not to end my presentation only with the commercial interests of the co-investors, but also with normal people who may not have savings or who may not have access to capital credit.
Yeah, we have in Croatia a lot of poor people. According to my information, 18% of the people in Croatia are going to freeze this winter because they will have no money for electricity or woods or something else like gas. The really prices of energy is going very higher. Yes, I think it was a brilliant presentation, and I'm really happy to invite you to come after Corona, after winter to Krk.
With pleasure.
And I think we need to make a workshop to really make design which will include government people and local stakeholders. And he will be challenged because, as I told you, we have very strong private sector in tourism, and they are really going very fast now to renewables. So
maybe
we can.
Vjeran, if I may just let you also with one last remark, and that is also a perspective. The territorial just transition plans, which will be formulated across Europe in all member countries now, will have access not only to the Just Transition Fund, but also to the other three pillars of the Just Transition mechanism. And we are talking billions of euros here. And all these co-investments will always ask also what is the socio-economic dimension of the investment. So if an investment on Krk can demonstrate that, for example, it changes a structural weak region and it creates employment in renewables and includes also vulnerable consumers, you will have also access to large funds for co-investments. So institutional investors, for example, European long-term investment funds could also be a complementary source. But that is, something that we really need to discuss when we meet on Krk and when we design your financing model together with the colleagues. And I'm very much, unfortunately, I will have to leave you at 2 o'clock, at 1:45 actually, because I have other commitments today with my students. But I hope that the other speakers, especially Ludwig Karg, will probably say something about the business models and financing sources, and of course also Todor is very knowledgeable. Unfortunately I've never met Aleksandar Kovacevic, and I regret that I can't stay for his presentation. But maybe we will have another opportunity to exchange.
You will have definitely, but we need to discuss even before you come to Krk to prepare everything. We have a lot of long winter communication by Skype and emails, it seems to me. And I'm very sorry that you can't join to us later for the fish slow food lunch. We can send you some fish by email maybe, because in this case we have really enough time to discuss about details. Thank you for now. Please stay with us. And I would like, if I can call Todor. Todor, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Hello, Bulgaria. So, Todor, I thought maybe you are the best guy to have quick comment, direct comment on everything what Jens said. I mean, it is definitely always look at the bright side of the life. It's new European big ideas. Everything is nice. Sun is shining. Electricity is producing. But when we come to our part of the world, I think we have reason to be a little bit more pessimistic. And I definitely believe in this model, and we are really trying to have deployment of something very similar even before I met each of you. But maybe, well, Todor is from one very big Bulgarian think tank, very famous and very good. They have especially good analyzing of the Russian influence in this area. I think that Mr. Putin likes you very, very much. And but you also have a lot of knowledge about energy situations. So can you give us first one, as wider as you can, point of view of transposition of RED 2 in the Southeast Europe? Then we can come back to our countries, Bulgaria and Croatia. Do you think that we can do it, or it will be just one nice wishful thinking from Brussels?
Thank you, Vjeran. First of all, thanks for inviting me for this panel. I'm very happy to be here. I have to say initially that actually we are together with Jens in the SCORE project. So I'm familiar with what Jens just presented. And as you said, Vjeran, unfortunately, I will be a little bit more pessimistic. For example, just an example, since the very beginning of the SCORE project, we have approached several Bulgarian municipalities and local communities, local NGOs, looking for a possibility to pilot or test the CSOP model that Jens presented. And guess what? There is no any single cooperative in my country still. So even the plans for establishing such cooperatives or energy communities are only, I would say, wishful thinking for some of the municipalities, even some of them that are quite advanced in using photovoltaics and wind power generation, but not in form of energy community or energy cooperative, but just as a single investment actor. So on your question about the transposition of RED 2 directive, I do believe that this would be the cornerstone, especially for Central and Eastern European countries. And what we have noticed until now is that maybe only Greece has advanced quite a lot in the transposition. And guess what? The results came already only for 1 year after the new law came into power. Yes, in Greece, the number of energy cooperatives actually increased from 400 something to 911 as of October this year.
So twice.
Yes, twice, exactly. So this is, I think, a very good example how a new legislation, even it has some problems, even it has some bottlenecks, as Jens said, this is a very long process. It can't happen at once, but still, this is how it works. And a second example, we had a meeting 2 weeks ago with a Bulgarian bank who has a special financial services or products for renewable energy cooperatives. And of course, they didn't finance even a single one in Bulgaria because they just don't exist. But they financed 11 such cooperatives in Greece because they have a Greek office.
What, Bulgarian bank financing cooperatives in Greece?
Exactly, because there is an environment, there, the transposition, like this, even partial transposition of RED to happen, already happened, and that's the result. So in this case, all the knowledge, all the setting, let's say, all the is existing in the country, at least in this bank, but it can function actually in Bulgaria, but it find a market in a neighbor country.
So people from the banks can always find the way to make money.
Yeah.
Please take a short break. Todor, we have two questions for the people who are watching us. Please, Lana, would you be so kind to give us first question? I think we need to see what is the results. So pool number one, do you think that local communities are crucial for the energy transition of the EU? Please vote yes, no, or maybe. Let's see what people can tell us about their opinion after Jens' nice presentation. Okay. So it definitely, Jens, you have very good success. Please, Lana, would you be so kind to give a second question as well, so you can totally comment it together. Do you think that new regulation directives are well done? Yes, no, or partly? Let's wait a few seconds. Oh, here is much more challenge. Definitely, yeah. That is the point. People still have some doubt about EU regulation. Thank you, Lana. Would you be kind to close it? What is your comment, Todor, about these results of the poll?
My comment would be that, especially for some countries in Central and Eastern Europe, as Jens said, and you just said that you have 18% energy poverty, if I'm not wrong, in Croatia, and in Bulgaria it's about 45. So the difference is really big, as you can imagine. Especially for some countries in Central and Eastern Europe, I would say mostly countries that have path-dependent negative public attitudes towards cooperation because of a socialist period, and also negative public attitudes towards public-private partnership in general, again because of their socialist past. Some of the ideas that have been introduced by European Commission through the RED II directive and the other clean package rules actually sounds quite distant. So they sound like something that could happen in Germany, maybe in Slovenia and Croatia, but not in Bulgaria, Serbia, or Macedonia. But I think this is, and this is my always my call. Usually we finish this kind of discussion with policy recommendations that are targeted policymakers. But my call is that we need first and foremost behavioral change in the people. So we need to train, to educate people. We need to show them good practices, like in Krk, how this could happen even against the existing legal and institutional circumstances or environment, and to incentivize them to start a common effort fighting, let's say, for their for a better future, because
So
I do believe
deployment of the SCORE project can help us to make our homework. Or even if you look, if I understood you good on the beginning, we can very deep change our society with that.
Exactly. And just to finish with something which is not so pessimistic, actually. Actually, I have prepared a short presentation about the challenges to renewable energy communities, Central Eastern Europe. I'll send you after that so you can publish. But just to finish with something which is not so pessimistic. Actually 2 months ago, I found accidentally maybe the first energy cooperative in Bulgaria. They don't call themselves energy cooperatives. They're just two neighbor houses. And I asked the people in a small village, actually, and I asked one of the owners how it became possible. And he said, okay, I have a small micro enterprise here in the house. So I needed some, because of the rising prices of electricity, I needed some additional source of electricity. And I started to build a PV installation for myself, for my house and for my micro family enterprise. And my neighbor, who is just living next house to me, asked me, what are you doing? And I explained him. And he said, okay, great. Could I also invest a little bit more money into this? And we both built a bigger PV installation, photovoltaic installation. And the first guy agreed. And actually now the two houses has a common installation managed by formally on a legal base by the micro enterprise of the one of the owners, while the other owner is become a kind of a shareholder into this, but actually both households are using the electricity. So they even don't know what is energy cooperative. They never heard about renewable energy.
And what is very fruitful for your both families. Yeah. Todor,
Exactly.
excuse me to interrupt you, but we have chance to hear Aleksandar. He's not in Oxford now, he's in Belgrade. And as much we know, Serbia is now without electricity most of the time. So, Aleksandar, can you hear me? Are you with us?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, do you have some video or you will be in the shadow? It is so dark. Oh yeah, we can see you.
You can see me, yes.
Aleksandar, we must keep you until you have electricity because...
So as you can see, we still have electricity.
But in the last few days, you had lack of electricity in Serbia. So before we start...
not at all.
Tell me what's going on in your country.
No, not at all. There was a big failure on Sunday morning, 6 o'clock. Serbia lost in 30 minutes, lost 37% of the production capacity in a given moment.
Did you have blackout as well, or just less energy?
No, we just had a loss of production capacity. And this energy system reacted extremely well. There was no blackout at all. System was stable. So we lost 1,650 megawatts, as I said, in 30 minutes. Base load, so coal-fired plants, and hydro and dispatch center and trading departments and people in hydropower plants, they have done extraordinary job and system remains stable. That's the first message. Secondly, as you may know, any other energy system in Europe eventually losing 37% of capacity will break down. But here it was, as I said, it was completely stable. There was no effect on European grid whatsoever. And this was completely managed situation. Of course, there are several messages here. One message is lignite power is not reliable as people try to or want to think, to believe. Secondly, the gas supply through the new route, Turkish stream under Black Sea, Turkey, Bulgaria to Serbia, is not flexible at all. And that system was not able to deliver any emergency supplies. We actually had in a given moment, one gas-fired plant was working, but the other one was dormant, ready to go, but there was no gas for it. And that remains so in last several days. So effectively, we have a situation where Serbia was practically forced to share the fuel, reserve fuel, between district heating companies and power plants on one side to help with this poor quality lignite. On the other side, there was no gas, increased gas supply through Bulgaria, and Serbia was forced to buy commercial gas from the rest of European market. I think it's a very important message also for Germany, who is going to shift from Ukraine to the Nord Stream 1 and 2, where there is no flexibility whatsoever. Third message was surprising and interesting. Serbia has very little wind capacity, like 400 megawatts installed altogether. In a given moment, on Sunday morning, wind was working at 90% capacity, which is surprising. The average utilization rate of wind in Serbia is less than 31%. So here it was working 90%, and it was working consistently at 90% for about 14 hours, which actually helped the system to manage through. So whoever speaks about wind, we have a working example. After that, after 14 hours, meaning in the evening of Sunday evening, wind dramatically dropped, and it remained unstable and pretty low until now. So last 4 or 5 days, the wind was in the range of between 0 and 40 megawatts, causing problems. I mean, as hydro plants being used already to actually support the system on a grand scale, there was little regulatory capacity to deal with the intermittency of wind. So that was an additional problem, but system still managed it because it's small still. Yeah. We have no information about any significant production from solar energy. Some power plants, for example, Bajna Bašta reversible pump storage plant, made extraordinary job. These people brought 900 megawatt equivalent to the grid within 7 minutes. So that was really extraordinary, again on European scale. And that's an additional issue here. So 138,000 residential customers lost voltage, not because of this failure, but because of snow and several small breaks on distribution grid, mostly villages in a mountainous area, etc. But the overall effect of these 138,000 customers was less than 100 megawatts, meaning that average load per customer was less than 1 kilowatt, demonstrating that these people, they had very, very small, they are effectively living in energy poverty. They are using fuel wood, and electricity is just marginal for them, even at the temperatures around 0 centigrade. So, of course, there was an effort to bring electricity back to them, and they've been...
Excuse me, Aleksandar, I didn't understand well. These people now are freezing, or they have some heating at home?
No. They are typically using fuel wood for heating. So, but now they got electricity, more than half of them got electricity within 24 hours. And right now we have negligible number without electricity. So this is also managed.
Excuse me, Aleksandar, my main question for you is, do you think that this case is extremely good case which can show us that redesign of topology of the electricity network to the small smart grid sub-networks consist on the energy communities is much better than existing system like you have now, because we have this mythology that big power plants based on the coal and gas is definitely something like best solution, the most safe solution. Can you comment it from the point of view of this changing of topology?
Definitely. I mean, there is a lot of reason all across Balkans in the mountainous areas to think about microgrids, local communities, and energy communities over there. So, and it's quite obvious that considerable distributed solar power or wind power will be helpful. Eventually, hydropower as well. We had a couple of examples. So, for example, city of Novi Pazar. These people originally, before Second World War, they had a hydropower plant in the middle of the city, which was a kind of community power plant. And the last couple of years, they are trying to revamp to use this hydropower plant again. It's difficult for them, but resource is just there, and there is a good reason for them to use it. So in city of Užice, they have effectively hydropower plant in the middle of the city, connected to the distribution grid and providing them with security of supply. So in these circumstances of breaking distribution network, that city remained well supplied from their own power plant. So you believe that future is, you believe that future is in the energy communities and small microgrids instead of this big system which made disaster last Sunday in your country. Well, look, as you know, in former Yugoslavia, the lot of electricity distribution was essentially community business. We had hundreds and hundreds of small electricity distributions, many of them built by something which we call samodoprinos, or let's say self-investment of the local communities. We still have like 30 gas distribution grids which are invested and owned by the local communities. Unfortunately, we don't have other forms of energy like district heating or solar or microgrids or these sort of things. But I would say that traditional model of local, let's say, cooperative is quite suitable in many cases. So people will, and I would like to add whatever colleagues been talking before. I would like to add probably the most important thing is energy security. I don't think that we can rely on European energy system anymore. I believe that there is a problem in market design, in management of the electricity and gas grid, and that that energy security is seriously affected. So there is a lot of reason for people and companies, industries, to think about their own energy supply.
Plus Putin.
Well, Russians are doing whatever is needed for their best interest on European energy market.
Okay, Alexander, please stay with us. Jens, first, do you have any comment for Alexander point of view? And also, I read this morning that the Nord Stream 2 will not start very soon. Is it true?
Well, yeah, I don't have a crystal ball here with me, but certainly the situation is complex, and we may brace ourselves for surprises in the year to come. However, what I would like to comment on Alexander's presentation is that I think, without going into any details, the main message is clear. With an increasing decentralization, we need, and with an increasing cluster structure of these projects, also the business models need to exactly adapt to this challenge of managing microgrids, of managing grids on islands, of co-generation, and the detrimental element in the legislative process is that unfortunately neither IEMD, the Internal Electricity Market Directive, nor the Renewable Energy Directive do acknowledge the problem of the complementarity of renewable energy sources, or actually this cluster strategy where you have flexibility measures. So there are almost no incentives that would give projects that actually do what Aleksandar is postulating an advantage over, let's say, a simple project where you have only one renewable energy source and where you don't have any complementarity, where you don't have flexibility measures. And that's something where the recast of these directives will have to bring better solutions. We really need to financially incentivize projects that answer these challenges and that are able to cope with the challenges of the cluster structure and the microgrid structure and similar situations as the one that we've discussed.
Okay, I think now is good time for 2 questions more. So please, Mrs. Lana, would you be so kind to give us the 3rd question for our... Okay, do you think that new OA directive are well implemented in the national energy laws in Southeast Europe? This means not only Croatia, but also for you, Bulgaria. We have just first few results to see about implementation. Oh, it's very clear, definitely. And please, can you give us, Lana, the last question? Do you believe in the speed up of the energy transition of Southeast Europe in the next few years? Let's wait a few seconds more. Oh, it's definitely very mixed answer. Todor, can you see these answers? I think you are the best guy now for the comment of this opinion that we have best transposition and speed up is definitely 75% of people don't think so. What is your opinion about these 2 important questions?
I think that partially the different economic, social, and political situation in our countries, from the old European member states, make the people not to believe that the general rules coming from Europe could be applied in a correct way, let's say, and could be beneficial for small consumers. And I should say that this is, in many cases, this is partially true, at least. What, for example, Aleksandar just mentioned about the Turk Stream, and we can remind that Turk Stream was built, I would say, against the public interest of both Bulgaria and Serbia, as this new gas pipeline doesn't bring high energy security for the region. And why some of the people are optimistic with this answers of the 2nd question. What we see around us is that just because of, I would say, normal business development, the renewables are the number of the amount of renewables increased very rapidly in our countries. So new business models also have emerged around this strong increase. For Bulgaria, for example, only this calendar year, the request for connection to the grid of new PV installations is equal actually to the half of the production of total energy of this country. So if all the investment plans happen, it's, of course, this is not possible, but if all of them happen, it means that in few years we will double the production of energy, of electricity in this case.
I understand. I think Jens needs to leave us very soon. So Jens, do you have any last comment on these two questions? Or if you have generally more comment or more questions? What do you think about this Balkan pessimism?
Well, you know, it's a big game, and obviously we have ignored the Balkans over the last 20 years, I would say. We haven't, you know, I've been working with our colleagues in Croatia for 30 years, I think a little over 30 years now. And I remember as a student, we were following Dayton, and we were critical about it. But our hope was, of course, that the European Union would then follow up very closely with the implementation. And that's a political problem. And what I see, what's happening now in Bosnia and Herzegovina is really tragic. But part of it is the result of us not giving enough importance to this region. So I think, especially against the background of the energy union, we should renew our interest and try to have much more focused policies in this region. So I share the pessimism to some extent, but I also would say this is an opportunity to wake them up and say, let's take action. And that's, of course, also something that we are hoping to do with our initiative, having, follower cities in Croatia, having partners in Bulgaria, working with colleagues in Poland, in the Czech Republic, and of course also in other countries of the area. So certainly, we're committed. And although the situation is difficult, I don't think there are not opportunities along the way, and especially with the Green Deal and the financing sources that are now available, this could also mean that the Balkan could leap ahead. And a good example is what Todor said about this example about the two houses that formed this unconventional energy community. There should be many, many more projects like that. But in order to do so, we really need to also communicate our business models, our assistance in the languages of these countries. And that's really the work that is on our plate for the next year.
Frankly said, I think that even more than the language of our countries, you need to understand the anthropology matrix of the people who live in these countries. We are a little bit different. Last but not least, I know that you need to leave us. Do you think that new government in Berlin will have more interest on Southeast Europe, or it seems from the first news what we're receiving here that new government will have more focus on the South?
I certainly think that you're right there, but again, many things depend on many factors, but in general, I would agree. Yes.
Okay, Jens, thank you very much for everything what you said today and everything what you made in the last 30 years, what you are coming here.
No.
I hope you will come in next 30 years. I think you need to leave us now. And I would like to come back to Mr. Kovacevic. I think you are really biased. You are really a good guy to have Balkan pessimism on the end of this panel. Do you think that Europe, even with all this money, can help us to become better, at least in the energy point of view?
Well, there are no signals in that direction so far. So we don't forget, we have spent, after Energy Community Treaty was signed in 2005, this is now 16 years. And we don't have a significant improvement in energy security, and we are all the countries are actually in violation of the treaty in terms of emissions, in terms of large combustion plant directive, industrial emissions directive. We have a power plant in Montenegro, which is on the European grid illegally without environmental permit, which expired last year, so 12 months already. So I don't see that anybody in ENTSO-E or Energy Community Secretariat or European Parliament or Commission is anyway upset with this rule of law situation. So,
but you still think that we should start to develop energy communities in our part of the world and start to cooperate first locally, then transborder?
yeah, I believe that security of supply question is overwhelming, and actually pushing the people to do everything in their capacity to manage with it. So that's one dimension. The other dimension is hydro potential is here, and if anybody in Europe becomes in any way concerned about phase out of Groningen field in Netherlands, about lack of flexibility from Nord Stream and Turkish Stream, maybe sooner or later they will come up to understand the massive hydro potential here in Lowitzsch.
If I understand you well, you think that our mix of renewables, what we have in Southeast Europe, sun, wind, hydro, geothermal and biomass is pretty good starting point to make energy transition?
Absolutely, this is outstanding, and the potential for a quick transition is here. I have to remind, all these lignite power plants actually came into existence within 10 years, between 1976 and 1986. I really don't see the reason why new renewable system cannot come up within 10 years.
And there is plenty of money in Brussels for that.
We haven't seen that
yet.
Yeah.
Well, we don't see that even on the horizon. I don't see any funds available for any kind of production of energy. So
no, we got the news last 2 weeks before that Croatia can have something like 800 million euro for the renewables for the premium prices.
Maybe, but so far we have very little energy investments. So you know what is energy investment actually? Energy investment is that somebody builds production capacity to serve the customer. It could be the customer himself, it could be cooperative, it could be, I don't know, commercial supplier, whatever, or utility. But so far, most of the investments are based on something completely different, selling energy to the government through the subsidy arrangements. So,
Aleksandar, thank you for the very nice contribution for this panel, and thank you for the lot of information. I hope you will have electricity in next few days. Otherwise, you should push photovoltaics on the roof of your home if you can do it, like
well,
Todor.
course, yeah.
Okay, in the January we have one very interesting conference about heat pump, and as much I know you have heat pump for the long time at home and you can share experience, but now I need to come back to Todor, and Todor, you have last 3 minutes, and if you can make some conclusion or recommendation in last 3 minutes of this panel.
Thank you, Vjeran. I want to add something to the last comment of Aleksandar about the energy security. It's really one of the maybe the most important factor for the Balkans or Central and East Europe, because still, if you look, for example, at the map of power grids in Europe and the map of gas connections in Europe, you'll see that still there is a visible Berliner Wall between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. And the connections that cross this wall are still very loose. They don't not so rich like in western part of Europe. So energy security is very important. But I would highlight also another point for the energy security, and this is affordability, which is linked with energy poverty, which is a huge problem for Central and Eastern European countries. As Aleksandar said, there is majority of Serbian households that are using woods for heating, and in Bulgaria it's the same. It's 60% of the population are using woods for heating as a major heating source, and for some countries to use woods for heating means that you are energy poor, and this is late in their definitions for energy poverty. We have to use the new opportunities offered by Brussels policies, Brussels green policies, I would say, to empower not only to empower the ordinary citizens. My big concern, or biggest concern, is that because of different governance deficits in our countries, let's say in this way, the investment for the investments in new energy sources, including renewables, would remain again in the hand of, I would say, big economic players and local oligarchs. So what you mentioned in the very beginning, Vjeran, what happened with the wind power generation. So it is important to have commercial investors in this, but it is important also to be accessible for small consumers, for ordinary citizens. And that
is excellent message for the end.
Yeah, and this is what we want to do, actually.
Yes, and we are going. I hope this is just beginning of the long cooperation, like the end of the movie Casablanca, if you remember.
Don't you think that the aim of the policy is energy poverty?
Yeah, I think we're going to make one panel just about it. Definitely.
Exactly.
Lana, please, would you be so kind to give us the last question to everybody to see what is the opinion of the people about this webinar? We have the last question, so satisfaction pool. You remember, I could get no satisfaction, but I hope you have some satisfaction here. So I think it was very interesting day here on Island Krk on the internet space. I hope the record of both panel will be distributed as much as you can. We are going to continue in the little bit different conditions. Guys, I'm really sorry that you're not with us here, but I think 2nd March is the next assessment of the non-COVID time that you can come to Krk and join to us. But in the meantime, we'll definitely have 3 or 4 interest panels about some items, and the show must go on. Let's wait for the results. If you can show us how good we are or how bad we are. Well, I think it is excellent. Yeah. Okay. I think no comment, definitely. Aleksandar, Todor, it was really a pleasure to chat with you as usually, and I really hope that we can continue in cooperation in the future for the beginning, we need to apply to some Horizons and Interreg projects in the beginning of the next year. Thank you, everybody. It was short, nice, and now we can see the shape of the job, what we need to do in the next few years or even more. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye from the island Krk.
Thank you, Vjeran, and goodbye to all.
It.